The document landed on his desk like it did every Monday morning. Another list of suspected traitors, another round of arrests to authorize, another week of interrogations to oversee. But this time, when Deputy Director Hayuk opened the folder marked "Suspected Anti-Socialist Students," his blood turned to ice. There, at the top of the list, was his daughter's name. Su Jin, medical student, second year. Evidence: discussing Western medical practices with German exchange students. At that moment, the interrogator who once struck fear into others in North Korea's State Security Department suddenly became the one under investigation. The man who had sent thousands to prison camps, who had extracted confessions through methods that would haunt him forever, suddenly found himself planning the unthinkable: escape from the hermit kingdom. This wasn't supposed to happen to families like his. 3 generations of service to the secret police, an apartment in Pyongyang's most exclusive district, a black Mercedes that arrived each morning to ferry him to headquarters, where guards saluted in perfect synchronization. Hayuk was untouchable, or so he believed, until he discovered that in North Korea, everyone is eventually consumed by the machine. The evidence against Su Jin was meticulous. CCTV footage showed her meeting with foreign students. Transcripts documented conversations about medical systems in other countries. Informant reports detailed how she and her friends had shared Western medical textbooks. In North Korea, where possession of a South Korean drama can mean execution, and where failing to cry convincingly at a leader's funeral results in prison camps, these charges meant certain death. Knew exactly what would happen next because he had orchestrated it hundreds of times. Within days, maybe hours, security forces would arrive at Su Jin's dormitory. They would drag her to the same interrogation rooms where her father had broken countless others. They would use the same techniques he had perfected: sleep deprivation that lasted weeks, stress positions that damaged joints permanently, water torture that simulated drowning, and electrical shocks that left no visible marks. And eventually, like everyone else, she would confess to crimes she may or may not have committed. Because in North Korea, the confession is all that matters. The State Security Department, or BOIBU, operates with an efficiency that would impress the Gestapo. Had been a master of this system. He specialized in breaking the young, especially students who had studied abroad, and returned with dangerous ideas about freedom and prosperity. His interrogation rooms had witnessed the systematic destruction of human beings, reducing brilliant minds to quivering shells who would sign any confession placed before them. He never failed to get results. No one he interrogated was ever declared innocent. Not because they were all guilty, but because the system demanded convictions to justify its existence. But now his own daughter had fallen into the web he had helped weave. The girl he had raised alone after his wife's death, the medical student who represented everything he had worked for, was about to disappear into the machinery of state terror. And knew something that most North Koreans don't. Once your name appears on these lists, you're already dead. The only question is how long the dying takes. The escape plan formed in his mind with the same methodical precision he had once applied to hunting defectors. He filed paperwork for a routine business trip to China, the kind of intelligence-gathering mission he had undertaken dozens of times. He arranged for Su Jin to follow days later, ostensibly to visit a sick relative. Every document was perfect, every permission secured. After all, who would suspect the Deputy Director of Interrogations of planning to defect? As prepared to leave the country he had served all his life, he couldn't help but reflect on the grotesque reality of North Korea's power structure.
It has risen by 50%. Diarrhea and skin disease are common from drinking polluted water.
While ordinary citizens survived on 300 grams of food rations per day, while children's growth was stunted by malnutrition that affected 28% of those under 5, while hospitals operated without electricity or medicine, the Kim family imported $30 million worth of liquor annually. The regime spent $3.6 billion each year on luxury goods. Swiss watches, French wines, Russian caviar, while 10.7 million citizens faced chronic food insecurity. The contrast was even more obscene at the political prison camps, the Kwanliso, where an estimated 120,000 people currently languish.
A cold winter, record rains this summer, and flooding has
These camps, some the size of cities, operate on a simple principle: guilt by association extending 3 generations. A man makes a joke about the leader, and his children and grandchildren are born in captivity, punished for a crime committed before they existed. Display portraits of the leaders that they're required to clean daily with special cloths, saving these images before their own children in case of fire. The journey to China was surreal. As his official car crossed the Friendship Bridge, Ri watched the familiar landscape of North Korea fade behind him, knowing he would never return. In Beijing, the metamorphosis began. The moment he swapped his North Korean phone for a Chinese one, the moment he contacted the broker who would guide them to freedom, Ri transformed from hunter to hunted. The skills he had honed tracking defectors now became his survival tools. He knew how North Korean agents operated in China, how they bribed local police, how they used networks of informants among the tens of thousands of North Korean workers stationed abroad. When Su Jin arrived days later, surveillance teams were already following her. The Boweebu had apparently developed suspicions, though not enough to prevent her departure. Father and daughter played an elaborate game of cat and mouse through Beijing's streets, changing clothes in restaurant bathrooms, switching taxis multiple times, using the very evasion techniques Ri had once studied to catch others. Their reunion at a train station in Yunnan province was brief and tense. Only when they were alone in a safe house did Ri explain the truth, that Su Jin had been marked for arrest, that returning meant certain death, that their old life was over forever. The group of defectors they traveled with included people from every level of North Korean society. Farmers who could no longer feed their families, merchants who had seen too much of the outside world, soldiers who had lost faith in the regime. But the most shocking encounter came when one man stared at Ri with recognition and horror. This was someone Ri had personally interrogated a year earlier, someone whose confession he had extracted through weeks of systematic torture. The moment stretched between them. Predator and prey reunited under circumstances neither could have imagined. The man could have exposed Ri to the group, could have demanded revenge for the suffering inflicted upon him. He simply nodded and looked away. That act of mercy from someone he had brutalized would haunt Ri more than any punishment could have. After days of walking, they reached the Mekong River, the final barrier between captivity and freedom. As they crossed into Thailand, Ri experienced a sensation he couldn't immediately identify: the absence of fear. For the first time in his life, he wasn't being watched, wasn't watching others, wasn't part of an endless cycle of surveillance and suspicion. The flight to Seoul was quiet. Su Jin slept against her father's shoulder while he stared out the window. Incheon Airport was a shock to the system. The size, the modernity, the casual prosperity visible everywhere. It contradicted every piece of propaganda Ri had absorbed and promoted throughout his life. North Koreans are taught that South Korea is an impoverished colony of American imperialism, that its citizens envy the paradise of the Democratic People's Republic. The gleaming terminal, larger and more advanced than anything in Pyongyang, told a different story. The South Korean intelligence officers who met them were polite, professional, and most surprisingly, humane. Instead of beginning immediate interrogation, they offered food and rest. They provided Su Jin with new clothes and toiletries. They spoke of human rights and dignity, concepts that Ri had spent his career crushing as dangerous Western propaganda. The contrast with North Korean interrogation methods was stark. Where Ri had operated in basement rooms with drains in the floor for easy cleaning of blood, the South Koreans conducted interviews in comfortable offices. Where he had used starvation and sleep deprivation as tools, they offered regular meals and breaks. Where he had threatened families to extract confessions, they provided psychological support and medical care. During his debriefing, Ri provided intelligence on the inner workings of the regime that few defectors could offer. He revealed details about Office 39, the secret bureau that generates billions through drug trafficking, counterfeiting, and cybercrime. He exposed the networks used to hunt defectors in China, the methods of surveillance employed against the population, and the structure of the prison camps he had helped fill. For Ri, the most shocking moment was discovering that electricity and water ran 24 hours a day. In North Korea, even elite families in Pyongyang experience regular blackouts. Hot water is a luxury. Here, these basics were so reliable that citizens took them for granted. Su Jin spent her first week taking multiple hot showers daily, amazed that the water never stopped flowing. The technology gap was equally staggering. Su Jin discovered she could access any medical journal in the world, watch surgical procedures from leading hospitals, and attend virtual lectures from Nobel laureates. The same information that would have meant death to possess in North Korea was freely available to anyone with internet access. Watching his daughter flourish in interrogator, sometimes as the victim, he would wake, confused about which reality was true. The freedom to walk outside without permission felt wrong. The absence of portraits to bow to each morning left him disoriented. Many defectors struggle with survivor's guilt, but Ri's burden was different. He carried the weight of the perpetrator, the knowledge that families were destroyed because of his actions, that children were in prison camps because of confessions he had extracted. No amount of rationalization about following orders or serving the system could erase the faces of those he had broken. Studies show that North Korean defectors in South Korea suffer from PTSD at rates of 30%, with suicide rates 7 times higher than the general population. They struggle to adapt to choice after a lifetime of obedience, to abundance after chronic scarcity, to freedom after total control. But for someone like Ri, who had been an instrument of oppression rather than simply a victim, the psychological toll was even greater. This is the tragedy of North Korea illuminated through one family's escape. An entire nation denied the most fundamental human experiences. They cannot freely choose their careers, their spouses, their homes, or even their hairstyles, which must conform to one of 28 state-approved styles. They cannot access information beyond state propaganda, cannot travel without permission, and cannot even think freely without risking their lives. The regime maintains power through a combination of total surveillance, brutal punishment, and psychological manipulation so complete that many citizens cannot imagine alternatives. They are born into a prison that extends from the Chinese border to the DMZ, from the East Sea to the Yellow Sea, a prison where the guards are prisoners themselves, where everyone watches everyone, where love for family is subordinated to loyalty to the state. Currently, approximately 33,000 North Korean defectors live in South Korea, each carrying trauma that may never fully heal. They represent less than 0.2% of North Korea's population, a tiny fraction who managed to escape what is essentially a nationwide concentration camp. Their testimonies provide the only windows into a darkness the regime desperately tries to hide from the world. Meanwhile, the international community continues to focus primarily on North Korea's nuclear weapons, while largely ignoring the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe. Every year of inaction means thousands more die from starvation, hundreds are executed for thought crimes, and millions continue suffering under the world's most oppressive regime. Hayuk now lives quietly in Seoul, his past because staying means starvation. Men are laboring in camps for crimes like possessing foreign media. Families are being destroyed by a system that demands they love their leaders more than each other. Stands on his apartment balcony, looking north toward the darkness beyond the DMZ. Somewhere in that darkness are the interrogation rooms he once commanded, the prison camps he helped fill, the system he served and that ultimately would have devoured his own daughter. The lights of Seoul continue burning all night, a reminder that somewhere, not far away, 25 million people live in darkness, both literal and metaphorical, waiting for a dawn that may never come.